Good evening. My name is Darren. I've been working the night shift as a security guard at a Walmart in Spokane, Washington, for just over a year now. I took this job after a rough patch in my life. Some things went sideways, and the quiet, consistent rhythm of night work sounded like the right kind of escape. The store sits just off a wide stretch of highway, surrounded by old gas stations, empty lots, and 2 motels that mostly house transients and late-night drifters. My shift starts at 11 p.m. and runs until 7 in the morning. I've memorized the layout of the place so completely that I could walk the entire store blindfolded and still know exactly when I'm passing between seasonal, home goods, and the frozen section. It's mostly quiet. Cameras, corridors, lights flickering now and then. But some nights the silence feels heavier than usual. We don't have overnight cashiers anymore, just 2 self-checkout lanes left open past midnight. The night team mostly restocks, cleans, and keeps their heads down. I walk the floor. I circle the store once every 30 minutes. I check the doors. I keep an eye on the screens in the back room. I report what I need to and leave the rest to the day shift. It's simple, it's boring, it keeps me out of trouble. But over time I started to notice things. Not big things. Not the kind of stuff you'd write a report about. Just patterns. Unusual buying habits. People coming in well after midnight, walking directly to specific aisles, picking up just 1 or 2 items and leaving without a word. Sometimes they wore hoodies. Sometimes they looked like normal folks on a weird schedule. But there was something about how they moved. Fast, focused, like they weren't shopping so much as executing a task. I didn't say anything. It's not my job to judge purchases or make assumptions, but the repetition got to me. I started keeping a mental list. Batteries and duct tape, large plastic containers, tarps, a particular kind of gardening glove we keep near the tools. And then, one night about 6 weeks ago, a man walked in at 12:04 a.m. He was average looking, jeans, dark jacket, no hat. He didn't glance at me, didn't look up at the cameras. He went straight to aisle 14, grabbed a thick coil of yellow nylon rope, turned around, and headed to the cleaning supplies where he picked up a gallon of store-brand bleach. He paid in cash at the self-checkout and walked out. It wasn't what he bought that struck me. It was how exact he was. Like he knew exactly where the items were, like he'd rehearsed it. That was the first time I felt something wrong. Not suspicious. Wrong. Like I was watching a scene play out that had nothing to do with the rest of the world. I mentioned it offhand the next morning to one of the other guards on the day shift. He just shrugged and said, "People buy weird stuff at night. You get used to it." I didn't mention it again. But that wasn't the last time someone came in for just rope and bleach. Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated. Not every night, not even regularly, but often enough that I started checking the cleaning aisle and the rope shelf every time I passed by. Most nights, both items were untouched. But sometimes, just sometimes, one would be missing. I'd rewind the camera footage during my breaks, but more often than not, the timestamp would skip or freeze between 12:00 and 12:20. A tech guy told me it was a known issue with the system buffering during uploads, but it didn't sit right with me. It always happened around the same window of time, and always when one of those 2 items had vanished from the shelf. At first, I thought maybe the stocking crew was shifting things around, misplacing inventory. I asked one of them casually one night, some kid named Mark who listens to metal in his earbuds and never makes eye contact. He looked at me like I was asking about ghosts and said, "I don't touch that aisle. That's maintenance's job." When I double-checked with maintenance, they said they hadn't been restocking bleach in over a week because the last order hadn't come in. But I'd seen fresh gallons sitting there the day before. I wrote it off as miscommunication, but I started feeling uneasy walking past those sections. It's hard to explain the kind of tension that builds when the rest of the world is asleep, and you start noticing things no one else seems to see. It wasn't just the purchases, it was the way people moved when they made them. Every single person who came in for those items, rope and bleach only, had the same pace. Calm. No browsing. They moved like they were following instructions. One guy was barefoot. Another had a pair of surgical gloves already on when he walked in. One woman was talking to herself in a whisper, eyes wide open, muttering a phrase I couldn't hear until she passed near the security desk. "It won't take long. It won't take long." She paid and left. Nothing in her hands but the 2 items. I brought it up once during a shift meeting. said something vague about unusual buying patterns. The manager on duty gave me that corporate smile and said, "We don't profile purchases, Darren. If it's legal, we sell it." That was the end of that conversation. I stopped asking questions, but I started logging times and faces when I could, just in case. One night there was a memo taped to the break room fridge. No signature, just black ink on printer paper. If a customer buys only rope and bleach after midnight, alert management immediately. I thought it was a joke at first, maybe one of the stalkers messing around, but no one claimed it, and within a few days a second copy showed up, this time taped to the inside of the security monitor station. Same message, nothing else. I looked through the camera logs, couldn't find when they were posted. They just appeared. After that, it got harder to pretend nothing strange was happening. The note on the fridge stayed up for 3 days before someone tore it down. No one admitted to doing it, and no one replaced it. But the second copy, the one inside the monitor station, remained. I kept glancing at it during my shifts like it was some kind of quiet order I wasn't sure I wanted to follow. There was no directive from corporate, no official email, no training module. Just that one sentence. I started wondering who wrote it. Not the manager, that much I was sure of. He didn't work overnights, and if he wanted to leave a directive, he'd send an email like always. This was someone else. Someone who had been watching long enough to see the pattern too. The idea that it wasn't just me gave me a strange comfort, but also a deeper dread. Someone knew. Someone else had seen what I'd seen and felt compelled to warn us, but not directly. It was a whisper in the system, a signal buried in routine. On the 4th night after the note appeared, the man came back. Or maybe it wasn't the same man. It was hard to tell. He looked similar, average height, average build, wearing a black hoodie this time, but his face was forgettable in that way that makes you remember it more, like a placeholder for something else. He entered the store at exactly 12:17 a.m. No cart, no hesitation. Straight to aisle 14. Same yellow rope, same gallon of bleach. Paid in cash. No bags, no receipt taken. I watched the cameras as it happened, and something cold ran through me when I realized the timestamp froze again. Not just skipped, froze. For 8 full seconds, the screen locked, then jumped ahead. When it resumed, he was already at the exit. I stood up. My finger hovered over the radio. I remembered the note. Alert management immediately. I didn't press it. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared of looking paranoid. Maybe part of me didn't want to see what would happen if I followed the order. So I watched him leave. He didn't look back. Just slipped into the night like he belonged there more than here. 10 minutes later, I walked the aisles. The bleach shelf had one empty spot. The rope section looked untouched, but I knew exactly where the missing coil had been. I checked the trash bins near the exit. Nothing. No packaging, no wrapper, no receipt. Like he'd never been there. When I came back to the monitor station, the note was gone. The second copy. I asked Mark if he'd seen anyone near the desk. He shrugged, earbuds in, eyes on the floor. Didn't even know there was a note. I scanned the footage again, but the camera feed during those 10 minutes was just static. Not blank, not off. Just white and gray noise with no audio. I sat back in my chair and stared at the monitor. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed some kind of unspoken test, that I was supposed to do something, that not pressing the radio meant something more than indecision. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Lights buzzed louder. The air felt thick. Nothing else happened, but I didn't feel like I was alone anymore. The next day I came in early. I don't usually do that, but something about the previous shift left me wired and uneasy. I wanted to check the logs, see if anything had been filed, if someone, anyone, had noticed the gaps, the static, the note that vanished. I logged into the internal system, the one that stores incident reports, unusual activity forms, maintenance requests. Nothing. Not a single mention of the man, the purchase, or the footage anomaly. I even checked under mislabeled tags like customer concern or equipment issue. The only thing filed during my shift was a request to restock toilet paper in the front bathrooms. I scrolled back through the report logs for the past 3 months. The deeper I went, the more I saw the same kinds of entries: clogged drains, low inventory, minor spills. Nothing about bleach, nothing about rope. and certainly nothing about that specific combination. It was like no one had ever acknowledged it officially. It was like it never happened. That afternoon, I sat in my car and debated what I was doing with my life. Watching empty aisles, logging ghost purchases, chasing patterns that no one else seemed to see. But I couldn't ignore the way it made me feel. Like I was walking along the edge of something too large to look at directly. Like whatever was going on wasn't meant to be recorded in our system because it didn't belong to our world. That night, I returned to my shift with my head low. I told myself I'd just focus on the usual rounds, ignore the tension, forget the missing note. But at 1:11 a.m., I passed the bread aisle and stopped. Someone had left a package of white sandwich bread just sitting there, slightly torn open. I leaned down to move it back into place, but underneath it was a crumpled piece of paper. A receipt, folded twice, yellowed at the edges. I opened it. It was dated 2 nights ago. The timestamp read 12:17 a.m. Items: rope, $12.99, bleach, $2.89, cash, exact. No store number, no cashier ID, just those 2 items. On the back, in shaky handwriting, someone had written, "Did you see him too?" I froze. My mouth was dry. I scanned the aisle. No one around. The restocking crew was on the other side of the store. The lights above me flickered once, then steadied. I pocketed the paper and walked straight to the manager's office. I waited for the assistant manager on duty, some guy named Carlos who mostly spent his shifts organizing shipment papers. I handed him the receipt without a word. He looked at it, raised an eyebrow, flipped it over, read the message. Then he did something I didn't expect. He nodded slowly and said, "Leave it with me." No questions, no confusion, just acceptance. Like he'd seen one before. Like this was part of something he'd already made peace with. I asked him who wrote the notes we'd seen earlier. He looked at me for a long time and then said, "Some things don't belong in the system, Darren. Some things just pass through." I didn't know what to say. He took the receipt and slid it into a drawer, closed it, locked it, told me to return to my post. I did, but for the rest of the night I kept checking that drawer with my eyes from the hallway window. It stayed closed. No one touched it. But I swear I could feel something pulsing behind the metal, like the drawer itself was trying to breathe. I started avoiding the break room after that. Something about seeing Carlos take that receipt and act like it was normal settled wrong in my gut. I didn't want to know what else was in that drawer. I didn't want to ask what he meant by, "Some things just pass through." Because if he was right, if something was using this place as a kind of transit point, then I didn't want to draw its attention. I began altering my patrols. Instead of walking the full perimeter every half hour, I lingered near the aisles where those items were kept. Bleach and rope, aisle 14 and aisle 23, the cleaning supplies and the hardware sections. Most nights, everything stayed in place. But now and then, I'd notice one item gone, and no one I'd seen on camera had passed through. I'd check the time, always after midnight, sometimes right around the same 12:17 timestamp. I started writing things down in a small notebook I kept in my back pocket. Not just what went missing, but what I saw and heard. When the lights flickered, when the temperature shifted, when the buzz of the fluorescents changed pitch. It was all small stuff, the kind of details that only matter when you've been staring at the same floors and shelves for over a year. But together it painted a picture I didn't understand. One night, while walking past aisle 23, I saw something that stopped me cold. A shopping cart, abandoned halfway down the aisle, turned at an odd angle. It wasn't there on my previous round. I approached slowly. In the cart were only 2 items, a coiled yellow rope and a full gallon of bleach. No receipt, no customer in sight. I looked around. The aisle was silent. My radio was crackling faintly, but no voices. I touched the cart. It was warm. Not room temperature, actually warm like it had been handled recently. I stood there, staring at it, unsure of what to do. The note's words echoed in my head again. Alert management immediately. I pulled the radio to my mouth but hesitated. Then, for reasons I still can't explain, I took the notebook from my pocket and slipped it under the bleach jug. Just a single page torn from the back, folded twice with one sentence written in pen. "Who are you buying this for?" I left it there, walked away. I didn't log it. I didn't move the cart. I just kept walking and waited. When I returned 30 minutes later, the cart was gone. Not pushed aside, not moved to the front. Gone. I checked the footage, but the aisle camera had frozen again from 12:14 to 12:23. When the feed resumed, the cart wasn't there. I searched the trash. I searched the loading dock. Nothing. I never found that notebook again. But the next night something else appeared. On the floor near the janitor's closet, tucked just barely under the edge of the door, a piece of paper. It had been torn from a spiral pad, the same kind I used. It had one sentence, scrawled in a hand that didn't match mine. They don't use it the way we think. That's when I started dreaming about knots. The dreams were vivid. Always the same room. Cold, white, featureless, with a long length of yellow rope coiled on a steel table. I was never alone in the dream, but I could never see who else was there. Just the presence. Watching. Expecting. Sometimes the rope would move on its own. Sometimes the bleach was already open, leaking across the floor in thin, almost purposeful lines. I'd wake up before anything happened, always before the knot was tied. And when I came into work after those nights, the store felt colder, quieter, like it had changed slightly while I was gone. The cameras were no help. They started glitching more frequently. Not just freezing now. Some feeds would reverse for a few seconds, then catch up. Others would loop for no reason. The IT guy blamed heat exposure, signal degradation, firmware lag, but he never had an explanation for why it only happened between 12 and 1 a.m., or why it only ever affected the same 4 aisles. I stopped telling him. I stopped reporting the glitches. Every time I brought it up, the response was the same. Shrug, mutter, dismiss. Except for Carlos. He never said anything after our last conversation, but I started noticing things, little details. His schedule shifted. He was showing up more often during overnights, even when he wasn't on the roster. He'd just be there, walking the aisles, checking the same sections I was. We never spoke, but sometimes we'd pass each other and share a look, a quiet understanding. One night I found a section of rope hanging from a shelf bracket, tied into a knot I didn't recognize. It wasn't just looped. It had structure, symmetry, a kind of mathematical tension to it. I reached out to touch it, but as soon as my fingers brushed the fibers, the lights above me flickered hard and went out for 2 seconds. Not long, but enough. When they came back, the rope was gone. I looked around the aisle. Empty. I radioed Carlos. Told him I thought someone might be playing games in the hardware section. He replied almost immediately. Do not touch the rope. That was all. Just that sentence. His voice was low. Even through the static, I could hear something tight in his throat, like he wasn't breathing right. I didn't respond. I went back to the monitors, rewound the feed. But the footage from that aisle was missing entirely between 12:31 and 12:39. Just black screen. No signal. I pulled the last few frames from before the blackout. Zoomed in. The rope wasn't in those frames. Neither was I. The aisle was completely empty, even though I'd been standing there seconds before the lights cut. That's when I realized the monitors weren't just failing, they were lying, showing me what they wanted me to see. That was the same night I found the third note. This one wasn't printed. It was written on a torn piece of receipt paper, stuck between 2 cereal boxes in aisle 9. They're not buying it for what it does. They're buying it for what it means. That line followed me home. I kept replaying it in my head like a riddle or a warning. I started keeping a box under my bed filled with every receipt I could salvage from those nights. My own log. Because if the system wasn't keeping track anymore, someone had to. 3 nights later, at exactly 12:18 a.m., it happened again. A woman this time, thin, middle-aged, wearing what looked like scrubs beneath a heavy coat. She entered without hesitation, bypassed the carts, and moved directly to aisle 23. I watched from the security monitor, unmoving. The cameras held steady, no freezing this time. Just a quiet, crystal-clear feed that somehow felt more wrong than the glitches ever did. She picked up the same yellow rope, same brand, same length, then moved to aisle 14 and grabbed the bleach with her left hand. She paid in cash. No change. Walked out without even looking at the exit sensor. I didn't call anyone. I didn't speak. I just watched. After she was gone, I rewound the footage, hoping, half expecting, it would be gone again. But no, it was all there. Start to finish, every movement captured. Only, she never blinked. Not once. I played the feedback 3 more times. Zoomed in. Her eyes were wide open, unfocused, staring past everything. When she passed the self-checkout, her lips moved slightly. I turned up the audio. The feed crackled, distorted, but one word came through. Not loud, not clear, but real. Remember. That was it. Just that word. She never took the receipt. I found it curled in the machine's printer tray 10 minutes later. Same timestamp, same items, same handwriting on the back. They always come in 3s. I stood in the aisle holding that thin paper in my hands, and something inside me twisted. Like the floor had shifted, but only for me. I radioed Carlos, asked him to meet me at the self-checkout. He arrived within minutes. I handed him the receipt. He read the back, didn't flinch, just said, "This is the second." I didn't ask what he meant. He pulled out a small envelope from his jacket and slid the receipt inside without another word. I asked him quietly, "What happens when the third one comes?" He didn't answer, just walked away, disappearing behind the sliding doors of the employee corridor. I didn't see him for the rest of the shift. I kept patrolling. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, that these purchases were some kind of signal, a countdown maybe, or a ritual. The phrase from the note kept repeating in my head. They always come in 3s. I started dreading the next one. I watched every entrance, checked every aisle, memorized faces. Nothing happened the next night, or the night after. But on the third night, I felt it before it even started. The lights were dimmer. The radio was silent. Even the restocking team moved slower, like they were underwater. At 12:20, a customer entered. No sound, no greeting. He looked familiar, not because I'd seen him before, but because he looked like someone who should have been part of the store, like he belonged to the space. He didn't walk, he glided, smooth, efficient, emotionless. I followed him on the monitor. He reached aisle 23. The rope was already waiting for him in the cart. He picked up the bleach, left without paying, just walked out. The sensor lights didn't trigger. The doors opened before he reached them. He never looked up at the cameras, and when I checked the footage later, there was no sign of him. Only the doors opening and closing on their own. I checked the aisle. The rope shelf was full, the bleach untouched. But I knew what I saw. I knew he'd taken it. I checked the receipt printer. There was a slip waiting for me. Blank. No ink. Just heat-imprinted paper with a faint image burned into the surface. 3 tight loops interlocking, like a knot or a seal. I didn't show it to anyone. I didn't file it. I just folded it slowly and placed it in my back pocket. I didn't sleep when I got home. I stared at my ceiling for hours, waiting for a dream that never came. Carlos showed up again 2 nights later. He didn't say a word when he entered, just nodded at me, grabbed a tablet from the back office and started walking the aisles like he was on inventory duty. But he wasn't checking stock. He didn't scan a single item. He kept pausing in certain sections. Aisle 14, aisle 23, the freezer section near the back wall, and just standing there like he was listening for something. I stayed in the security booth, watching him through the monitors. Every time he stopped, the feed would distort slightly. Not glitch, not skip, just pulse. A soft ripple across the screen like the image was underwater. At one point, around 2:40 a.m., I lost track of him entirely. He vanished off camera for 10 minutes. When he reappeared, he looked pale, his shirt soaked at the collar. He didn't meet my eyes as he passed by the booth, just muttered, "It's deeper than I thought." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. That same night, something shifted in the storage area. The back room where we keep pallets and old promotional displays was normally quiet. Just a few rats now and then, the hum of the loading dock fans. But at 3:12 a.m., I heard a sharp metallic clang through the hallway wall. It wasn't normal. It had weight, like something had been dropped from a height. I left the booth and walked slowly toward the double doors that lead to the storage room. As I approached, the temperature dropped. Not figuratively, literally. I could see my breath. I radioed Carlos. He didn't answer. I pushed open the door. The motion sensor lights flickered on in sequence, revealing long rows of pallets, wrapped boxes, empty shelves. Everything looked normal, but the cold remained. In the center of the room was an overturned shopping cart, one of the older models we hadn't used in years. Its wheels were rusted, one bent completely out of shape. I moved closer. Inside the cart was a single item, a receipt roll. Not a receipt, but the entire roll used in the self-checkout machines. It had been burned around the edges, melted almost. I reached in and picked it up. It was warm, just like the abandoned cart I'd found weeks before. As I turned it over in my hands, I saw faint impressions on the outermost paper layers. Not ink, just pressure marks. Symbols, maybe. 3 lines intersecting. A triangle formed by braided curves. I placed it back in the cart and backed away. The lights above me dimmed, then snapped off completely. I stood in darkness for 5 full seconds. When they returned, the cart was empty. The roll was gone. I didn't hear it move. I didn't hear anything. Just silence. I walked back to the booth and locked the door. The rest of the shift passed in slow, dragging time. No other disturbances, no customers. But the cameras felt different, more aware. The angles seemed slightly off, as if they'd been adjusted by something just before I arrived. At 5:58 a.m., a new note appeared, taped to the inside of the monitor glass behind my chair. Plain printer paper, the same black font. No signature. It said, "Stand still when the lights go out. Do not breathe until they return." That's when I realized we were never meant to stop them, just survive them. After that night, I began treating the store differently. Not as a place of work, but as a kind of structure with its own set of rules. The kind you don't read in manuals or hear during onboarding. Rules that get whispered between shelves. Rules that appear taped to walls with no witnesses. I started keeping my flashlight on, even when the power was stable. I kept my back to the walls as much as possible, avoided the center of large open areas. I stopped using the restroom on shift, after I caught my own reflection blinking out of sync in the mirror. Small things, but they added up. Carlos and I didn't speak again for a while. He still came in unannounced, still walked the same pattern, still took notes on that tablet no one else ever seemed to see. I stopped asking questions, but others started noticing. One of the night restockers, a quiet older guy named Len, came up to me during a cigarette break and asked if I'd noticed any missing time. I didn't understand at first. He said, "Sometimes I'll stock an aisle, look at the clock and it's 2:30. Then I blink and it's 3:05. Like I just skipped ahead. But I'm in the same spot. Same box in my hands, I didn't know what to say. I asked him which aisles, he said 14 and 23. I nodded and told him to avoid those areas after midnight. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Yeah, that sounds about right," and walked away. That same night I noticed the inventory logs had started drifting. Not just minor discrepancies, whole units missing. Rope, bleach, certain gloves, specific box cutter models. Items disappearing before they were even scanned into the system. I ran the numbers 3 times. Then I printed them and brought them to the manager's office. Carlos wasn't in that night, so I handed them to the acting supervisor. She looked at the report for about 10 seconds before sliding it into a drawer and saying, "We'll look into it." But she didn't log anything. She didn't even ask a follow-up question. I left the office with a knot in my stomach. As I walked past the pet food aisle, I noticed something new. An old floor sign, the kind used to warn about wet tiles, leaned against the end cap display. Only it wasn't yellow. It was black. And instead of caution, it said, "Don't follow them out." I scanned the aisle. Empty. The cameras showed nothing. I didn't touch the sign. I didn't even breathe near it. Just kept walking. The next few nights were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. More like the way the woods go quiet before a storm. I started hearing things over the PA system. Soft static, sometimes a voice, always cut off. Once it was my own name. Whispered, not spoken, just barely audible under the usual muzak. I checked with the AV guy. He said the PA system couldn't even broadcast from the booth I was in. I believed him, because I hadn't said anything. The voice hadn't come from me. On the 6th night after the storage room incident, I found another note. This one inside my locker. folded, tucked beneath my security badge. "You're being cataloged every time you blink." The paper smelled like bleach. After I found the note in my locker, I started sleeping with the hallway light on in my apartment. I didn't tell anyone. Not Carlos, not Len, not even the one friend I had left from before I took this job. There was no way to explain it. No way to frame it without sounding paranoid or broken. But deep down, I knew something had shifted in me. I wasn't just observing anymore. I was part of it, entangled. Whatever was moving through this place, it had seen me now, and it remembered. A few nights later, I was reviewing old files, bored mostly, just trying to take my mind off the hum that had been building inside my skull. I accessed a restricted folder on the shared server, the kind that usually holds training videos and procedural updates. But this one didn't have a name, just a number, 0619 retired. It was buried under several layers, only accessible through a string of outdated hyperlinks. Inside were scanned copies of handwritten logs, security entries, date-stamped and signed by someone I'd never heard of, a former night guard. His name was Stanley. The entries began in 2009. They were short, precise, written in a clean block print. The first dozen logs were routine: suspicious loiterers, a fight in the parking lot, someone trying to return a blender at 3 a.m. But then the tone changed. One entry, dated July 12th, read, "Customer purchased rope and bleach at 12:16 a.m. Refused eye contact, paid exact change, no receipt taken, made no sound." The next night, same customer, same items, different clothes, same behavior. Lights flickered in aisle 14. Camera froze for 8 seconds. I read through 47 entries, all of them different dates, but always the same pattern. Always after midnight. Always the same 2 items. Then, a gap. No logs for 3 weeks. When they resumed, the handwriting was shakier, the tone more erratic. There's something in the receipt paper. You can only see it if you fold it 3 times and burn the corners. Another. The knot is not functional. It's symbolic. They tie it in silence. And then finally, I asked management. They smiled too much. Said it's just part of the flow. I think they're letting it happen. That entry was dated one day before his log stopped entirely. No resignation, no handoff, just silence. I looked up Stanley's name in the HR directory. No file, no exit paperwork, no termination record. I asked Carlos about him the next shift. He didn't even look up from his tablet, just said, "He saw too much. It happens." That night I found something in the loading dock that I still can't explain. Behind a row of stacked pallets wedged deep in the corner where the lights barely reach was a folded uniform shirt. The old design, from over a decade ago, neatly placed. No dust on it. Just sitting there like it had been waiting. Inside the shirt pocket was a Walmart badge. Stanley, no last name, just the first. When I touched it, the air around me felt pressurized, like I'd stepped into a vacuum. The badge was cold, almost metallic, even though the room was warm. I left it where I found it, walked back to the front of the store. My hands were shaking. That's when I noticed it. Aisle 14 had been restocked. Fully. Perfectly. Every bleach jug aligned with unnatural symmetry. The kind of arrangement no overnight worker would ever take time to make. Too precise. Too intentional. I stared down that aisle for a long time, wondering if it was watching me back. By this point, I'd stopped expecting answers. I didn't look for explanations anymore. I accepted that some things happened here not because they made sense, but because the building itself required them. Like rituals in a place that had forgotten it was a temple. Still, I kept walking the aisles. Still checked the rope, the bleach. Still watched the cameras even when they told me lies. And then, 3 nights ago, something different happened. It was 12:06 a.m. when I saw it. A plastic grocery bag sitting neatly at the end of aisle 14, placed carefully in the center of the walkway. I approached slowly. No one else was on that side of the store. The bag wasn't crumpled or forgotten. It was deliberate. Inside were only 2 items. The usual. 1 yellow rope, coiled, and 1 gallon of bleach. But this time, something else was there. A folded note, resting between the items like it had been placed with precision. I didn't touch anything at first. I looked around. Nothing but cold fluorescent light and the soft hum of the ceiling fans. Then I reached in and took the note. It was written on receipt paper again, but this time it wasn't blank. The ink was fresh. The timestamp read 12 a.m. exactly. No item list. No total. Just a single sentence written across the back in all capital letters. You know who it's for. I stared at that message for a long time. My mouth dry. My hands cold. I checked the receipt printer. Nothing had been logged. I checked the trash. No discarded copy. It hadn't been generated, it had been made. On purpose. For me. I put the note in my pocket and backed away from the bag. I didn't report it. I didn't move it. I just walked back to the monitors and sat there silent, listening to the hum of the store. And then around 2:12 a.m., Carlos walked in. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to aisle 14, picked up the bag, looked inside, nodded, and walked out the back employee exit without a word. I checked the cameras. No footage. The feed had gone blank the moment he appeared and resumed after he left. That morning there was no sign he'd ever been there. No sign the bag ever existed. No logs. No footprints, just silence. But when I got home, I found another receipt folded inside my work jacket. I didn't put it there. I unfolded it slowly. It was blank at first. Then, under certain light, faint letters emerged, burned into the fibers. Do not follow him. I didn't sleep that day. I sat by the window with the curtains drawn, eyes fixed on the parking lot below, watching, waiting, half expecting to see Carlos standing there in the shadows. But he never came. No one did. And yet I knew the message was true. He'd taken the bag not for himself, but for someone else. Or something else. And that someone was already waiting. I haven't seen Carlos since that night. His name still appears on the roster sometimes, listed for overnight shifts that he never clocks into. No one seems to notice. No one asks where he is. The store continues to function. Stock gets rotated. Shelves refilled. Customers come and go. But the nights feel different now. Hollow. Like the air itself is watching. The cameras still glitch, though less frequently, and the lights still dim around 12:17 like clockwork. I've stopped checking the bleach aisle unless absolutely necessary. The rope section, too. Something about those spaces feels occupied. Not by people, but by purpose. A kind of lingering intention that doesn't need movement to be real. The last receipt I found was folded beneath my coffee mug at the start of shift. It had no items, no time, no store number. Just one phrase pressed into the paper from beneath like someone had written it upside down with too much pressure. You've already agreed. I don't remember agreeing to anything, but I can't deny that I keep showing up. I clock in, I do the rounds, I log incidents I know won't get read. I watch aisles where no one walks, and when the lights go out, I hold my breath until they come back. I don't ask questions anymore. I don't touch what isn't mine. I just wait. There was one final note, taped to the back of the freezer door, not printed, not typed, written in what looked like oil or maybe something darker. It said, "When the last loop tightens, do not resist." I haven't seen any more customers buying rope and bleach, not in the traditional sense, but sometimes I find combinations of things scattered in strange places. A pair of gloves stuffed behind cereal boxes, a shopping list scrawled into the condensation on the meat cooler glass. Once, a single shoe filled with salt. No explanations, no context, just quiet offerings to something that doesn't need names. Management no longer checks in with me. My reports go unread. The assistant manager changed again last week. Young guy, cheerful. He tried to shake my hand on his first night. I told him not to stay past midnight. He laughed, said he could handle it. That was 4 nights ago. He hasn't been on the schedule since. His locker is still locked, untouched. The cameras outside his office haven't recorded any motion. But the night after he vanished, I found a receipt stuck to my monitor. Blank, except for one faint fingerprint in the center. Mine. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't been near it. But I didn't throw it away. I added it to the box under my bed. I don't think I'm supposed to leave this job. I think people like me are chosen, not hired. and the store knows how to keep us. The night shifts keep coming. The silence deepens, and the rope never runs out.